Welcome everyone to the HPBOP certification update. We are in the middle of the pilot phase, and let's get right into it. Ted, I have with me Ted Walensky and Larry Chang, and who you've met. And Ted, maybe you could speak to this first slide in terms of these industry trends.
Yeah, so I'm going to read it because I haven't seen it yet, but buildings contribute almost 40% of the global CO2, increasing pressure to improve efficiency of mechanical systems. Availability of improved BAS and EMS technology. So this is an area where things keep changing and increasing in not just availability, but complexity. Integration of mechanical controls with other building systems. So by other building systems, we're talking about security, fire protection, card access, video, all those areas. Integration mechanical or availability of very complex sequences of operations. We already talked about that today with ASHRAE 36, and they're just getting more complex because we're requiring more of them. And every time you add on another item onto a control sequence, it's not just linearly increasing by one. It takes the sequencing and the programming of that and starts to exponentially increase what's required for it. Availability of improved BS data management and fault detection tools, trend towards building performance standards and carbon footprint accounting. We're seeing more and more of that today, and a lot of our discussions today were geared towards that carbon zero approach that we're trying to go towards, electrification, increased attention to health and safety standards and IAQ, indoor air quality, increased need to manage electrical load and grid interactions. And that's what we're looking at in some of the work we're doing with LBNL. Yeah, grid interactive efficient buildings, is that what it stands for? So we have that, and in healthy buildings movement and post-COVID focus on health and wellness. So all this just drives around the fact that buildings are progressing, the technologies in our buildings are progressing. We have to make sure that the workforce working in the buildings, working on the buildings is progressing. And that's a big part of the drive behind this HPBOP certification process. Anything else you want me to cover on that, Peter?
We'll keep going.
All right.
So the goals of the certification, we are seeking to establish a national standard for the cognitive domain knowledge and skills for high performance building operations technical professionals. We are going to develop curriculum guidance to promote the alignment between standard two-year college degree programs as well as other training providers such as apprenticeship programs. We are needing to develop a study guide for exam takers. We want to, and this is really important, support greater recognition and career advancement opportunities for building engineers and operators. This group of individuals has been long undervalued and overlooked fairly consistently. And yet, as we noted in the Guideline 36 presentation, their role is key to any sort of high performance operation. And as well, improve the effectiveness and professionalization of facility operations staff by aspiring to the certification. The certification development has been long and arduous, and I was recently in a meeting with Larry with JLL explaining the certification development process, and I realized, I could talk for days about it. It goes all the way back to some of our early research on best practices. And there's a large body of research that has gone into it. It builds upon the foundational knowledge in that undergrids ASHRAE Standard 180. And one of the things that we did early on, we did a kind of gap analysis between high performance and basic maintenance that you see enfolded in ASHRAE Standard 180. And it kind of takes off from that point. It focuses on the cognitive knowledge and skills that building engineers must use to operate and maintain high performance buildings. It recognizes the need to improve the education and training in the sector. All right. It emphasizes the use of BIS tools and capability. ASHRAE itself did some very important pioneering work on Guideline 32, developing Guideline 32. And that work helped inform this certification. Also, Department of Energy sponsored some very important work in terms of detailing knowledge and skills for building engineers and building operators. And it built on that work as well. At every step, the standard has been developed by a team of industry practitioners and experts in high performance building operations. These are the knowledge and cognitive skills identified in the DACOM. DACOM is a process to get at knowledge and skills, and it uses a multi-day forum with industry experts who basically develop and outline those knowledge and skills, in this case for HPBOP. Do you want to comment a little bit on this slide, Ted?
Well, so this has a lot to do with not only what was drawn from the DACOM, but what we did on our pilot. And so these categories kind of are derived from those two different areas, DACOM and our pilot program. There's a lot of overlap in these, and when you get down into the weeds, difficult to kind of sort some of this stuff out. And really, that's kind of the main thing that I pull away by looking at these 6 areas.
Yes, there is a lot of overlap within those knowledge and skills for each area. And it's really what it's describing is the process of how one builds a high performance building and maintains the high performance building. One of the, and we had a question here, how far does one go into any particular one, sometimes hired out? What is part of the job? So that was something that the scheme committee looked at very carefully. What the DACOM committee did was it outlined the entire process. It did not necessarily, in all cases, differentiate roles. And in certain cases, there's a role for the owner to establish building performance goals. The technician doesn't establish those goals. And so during the scheme development process and the other subsequent processes, that was fleshed out more to define more precisely the role of the technician vis-a-vis the role of the owner and other stakeholders. Progress to date, we have been working all along with the Ohio State University Center on Education and Training for Employment, the SEAT Center. This group was one of the early practitioners and developers of the DACM process and early adopters and the JTA process and so forth. So they're recognized national experts in this area. And the following steps have been completed. The DACM was developed with industry practitioners. The DACM informs the more detailed job task analysis, the JTA. The DACM content was validated nationally by industry practitioners, and the various duties and tasks were rated on their relevance and importance, and who performs those tasks. So that process of validation and rating then fed back into the JTA development process and ultimately the scheme committee. Based upon the DACM, a detailed job task analysis was completed, including updates to the original DACM that were made. And if you go to our hpbop.org website, you can look at the DACM and you can see the edits that were made to it at the JTA process. Subsequently, a scheme committee was composed and instituted, and it was composed of industry practitioners and stakeholders. It reviewed the JTA, developed criteria for exam development, and developed the certification scheme that is also available on the website. A team of industry practitioners developed a test bank of about 215 questions for the pilot exam phase. And the pilot phase of certification was launched in April 2023. The goals of the pilot phase: obtain sufficient participation to ensure statistically significant data sample, and then psychometrically analyze database of exam results and finalize the test bank at 150 questions and establish a core set of questions and floating set of questions to enable exam takers re-exam retakes, and then also established the cut scores for those who take the exam during that pilot phase.
And I think this underscores, Peter, how rigorous of a process this really is. With so many people involved with it, I've been continually amazed at how well it seems to hone in on developing something that is rigorous and quite in depth, but something that covers the industry as a whole. So I just want to underscore that part of, it took a lot of time, but it's coming up with a really good product here. So
some of our next steps. Bullet number 1, continue promoting the certification to reach the target number of exam takers. And that's where we've been struggling. We have quite a large number of people who have signed up for the exam, but only just over 25% of those individuals have actually taken the exam. And so Larry and I have been marketing the exam to some of the specialized communities and stakeholders. You want to comment on that a little bit, Larry?
Yeah, we've been doing outreach, as Peter mentioned earlier, to Jones Lang and LaSalle, Department of General Services, And certainly the faculty within our various building science programs across the US, including our very own college network, can apply for the exam. So, this is not strictly limited to, full-time building technicians. We've also had some mechanical engineers and others, apply and take the exam. But we do need many more exam takers, and we hope you'll start the year off right. And if you've applied, go ahead, schedule and get it off your plate.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Yeah, there is, if you go into the HPBOP.org website and get a login, you can see to qualify for the test requires education and industry experience. So it's a combination of the two. As Larry was noting, many of our faculty qualify because they have many years of industry experience by and large, as well as educational background. So a wide range of people have been taking the test, and we suspect that we need to add more resources to help people feel comfortable to take the next step of not just applying for the exam, but actually completing the exam. At least that's a theory. And beyond that, so that's where this notion of doing a study guide of sorts to help encourage exam applicants to complete the exam. And we are continuing to get more and more applicants, and a small percentage of exam takers along with those applicants. We would love to complete the pilot phase quickly. This spring, in fact, we have continued to keep the pilot phase open. We expected it to be completed much, much faster, but we need to get more exam takers to get a good psychrometric analysis. At that point, when we complete the pilot phase, we can initiate the accreditation process, and very quickly thereafter convene a review committee to update the JTA, because we were impacted by COVID fairly substantially, and that slowed us down. We lost some time there, but we are poised to take the next steps and complete this process as quickly as possible.
One thing I want to mention, Peter, if you can go back to that last slide for just a second. Studying for the exam, I remember I took one of the ASHRAE certifications a number of years back when it was first being rolled out, and I went, just like many of the people who have applied for taking the exam, to go and try to study for it. ASHRAE had a big list of different manuals and things that you could study from. And, it's OSHA, many of the ASHRAE guidelines and standards, and other things from the industry. And I looked at that as list, probably about 20 different publications. And my thought was, well, there's no way I can study for that because there's just so much there. And so I did it, and I took the exam and was fortunate enough to be able to pass it. But I think the same type of thought process applies here, where there's so many different areas that high performance buildings touch on, that there's a lot of different areas you can study in. We're going to get that guideline written up eventually, but it's that same type of approach where you could go and study from a bunch of different manuals and guidelines, and it would take a lot of time and effort. A lot of this just kind of falls back onto what your experience been. What have you been involved with in the past, and use that knowledge to go through and step through and get the questions answered. That's just, I want to comment on that. So go back to the questions.
Okay, yeah, the first question from Patrick. Yeah, some of our initial funding for the DACM was California-based. The validation process was national, and the JTA drew from a national set of practitioners.
As well as the scheme committee.
Right, yeah. And Patrick has another question about publicly, let's see, an impartiality statement. That is a good catch, Patrick. Thank you for that. We'll certainly add that as needed. And Madeline asks, how many people do you need to take the exam? Well, we would like at least another 30 to 50 people. So we are going to be making a big push this spring to get over the finish line on the to complete the pilot phase. And one other comment regarding Patrick's question. What we realized is, Patrick, that in doing the pilot, it seems like, well, the pilot process, that isn't quite as rigorous as when you're formally accredited. Well, in truth, you need all of the pieces in place just to do the pilot. And so if we did not have that impartiality statement, we'll certainly add it. Thank you. And I think we're out of time.
Right. We need to give a little bit of an overview regarding our roundtables today. And you'll all note that there are 3 occurring simultaneously from approximately 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. We have Bob Clark, who will be leading a discussion on all electric versus gas-fired appliances, HVAC curriculum at the crossroads. And then Ted will be leading a session on instructional applications of campus as a living lab. Unfortunately, our friend and former co-PI Brian Lovell is under the weather and could not join us today. And then last but not least, Robert Nirenberg will be giving updates from application of the lesson plans that were developed from the BEST 2023 BAS workshop. Okay. And Ted, is there something you'd like to mention about your particular session?
Yeah, it's just going to be basically a discussion, open discussion. I'm going to start by just talking through the campus is living lab guide, and then also talking through what I've been doing that follows those guidelines. And then I'll open up the discussion and find out what other people are doing and see if we can share ideas to make what we're all doing better.
And Robert?
Yeah, very similar. This is going to be an open discussion. We're looking for feedback from what we did from the summer workshop, where we had a bunch of folks present, or everybody present, some labs that they were doing in their own systems. And yeah, so it's going to be an open discussion, see what we've come up with, share some updates right along those lines.
Yeah, so Peter, we have a couple more questions that came up there, and I just want to make sure that Alice, we'll get to you on an answer about how you might be able to market that for job applicants. Just thought I wanted to point out.
Are you saying that's
Is
a
that-
question regarding the certification exam?
Yeah, regarding
Yeah,
the certification.
Yeah.
She, as
I
as
think-
an employer, how could we market job opportunities to the people who have taken the exams? In other words, they're interested in people who have met these requirements.
Right. I think what we're seeing, and we're going to develop some endorsements from very senior people in the sector regarding the improved job opportunities. We do have data, anecdotal data from some of our earlier pilot program efforts where we have seen people move from a chief engineer position, say of several high-rise apartment buildings, to a much bigger project, say a large-scale stadium or something. So we've seen the results of this type of recognition directly in career advancement. And we need to emphasize that more, I believe, in response, as Alice points out correctly, I think.
Then there wasn't one other question about when the results of the pilot exam be released. And once we have enough takers for the exam, we will then go through, score it all, and provide the results of the exams to those individuals who have taken it. So we don't have a date or time on that at this point.